Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Health Law LLM Alumni Stories and Career Journeys virtual information session. My name is Andres Constantine, and I will be your moderator today. We're very excited to have you join us to learn more about the experience of former students of the Health Law LLM programs at Georgetown University Law Center and hear about their career journey post-graduation. To our audience today, please share your name in the chat, where you're joining us from, and how you've heard about the webinar. Maybe you heard about it in LinkedIn, email. It's important for us to know more about that. So we would appreciate if you can share. I am joined today by a panel of 4 accomplished Health Law LLM alumni that have kindly agreed to share their experience as former students, their career journeys post-graduation, and how the program helped them get to where they are today. We have Nathalie Demirdjian-Rivest, who graduated in 2021, Kelvin and Nguyen, graduated in 2022, Caroline Norris, graduated in 2020, and Luciana Sakamoto, who graduated in 2018. So welcome to our panelists. Towards the end of this session, our panelists will be taking questions from the audience, so feel free to use the Q&A box that is at the bottom of your screen to share your questions with us throughout the session. So now, let's dive into our conversation. The first question is to all of you, and again, thank you for joining us today. Could you tell us a bit about your background and your current position at the moment? And I will start with you, Luciana.
Sure. Hi, everyone. First, I would like to say that I'm really happy to be here with you. Andy, thank you again for inviting me to join this informational session. I think this webinar is really important and a great opportunity to learn more about the health law program. I'm a Brazilian lawyer. I graduated in 2009, and I have been working in healthcare at the law firm Pinheiro Neto Advogados in Brazil for 17 years. I decided to pursue my LLM after concluding my master here in Brazil, also related to health law. And when I was researching a little bit about the LLM program, I verified that Georgetown was the only university that offers a specific certificate focused on health law. And I was really surprised with the wide range of courses offered by Georgetown. All of them were really very specialized in health. Then when I concluded my LLM, I rejoined my law firm here in Brazil. And since then, I have been working in the healthcare practice. Just to mention briefly, my work here is focused on healthcare plans, especially the ones that employers offer to their employees, involving both litigation and regulatory issues. And I also assist my clients in regulatory issues involving M&A transactions, involving also health insurance companies. So just a brief background.
Thank you, Luciana. Kelvin?
Hi, everyone. And yeah, it's really nice to be here as well. And thanks, Andy, for inviting me to be in the panel. So I'm Australian, currently living in Geneva. So I'm currently working at an organization called the Medicines Patent Pool as a legal associate. And so the Medicines Patent Pool, it's an organization that focuses on promoting access to medicines in low and middle income countries. And for my master's, I did the Global Health and Governance program, which is the joint program. So I did 1 semester at Georgetown, and then 1 semester at the Graduate Institute, which is in Geneva. Before all of that, I was an IP lawyer in Australia. So I spent some time working at a law firm in their IP department, focusing mostly on patents in the life science space. And then after that, I spent 1 year in-house, like a health practitioner regulation agency. All of that's been quite helpful for my current role. So at NPP, I'd say there's probably maybe 2 main lines of work that I'm involved in. So there's the patent licensing work. So what we do is we negotiate and enter into license agreements with pharmaceutical companies for patents that cover certain drugs, and then we sub-license those patent rights to generic manufacturers who then can develop and supply generic versions to low and middle income countries. And so with that, I'm involved in things like drafting and negotiating those agreements. Once they're signed, I'm also involved in advising and interpreting them for our internal teams and for the generic manufacturers as well. The other line of work, it's there's the mRNA technology transfer program, which is an initiative that's being co-led between WHO and NPP. And for that, what it tries to do is it tries to increase the capacities of manufacturers in LMICs to develop mRNA-based vaccines. And so with that, I'm providing legal support on that program. So it can range from assisting them put together technology transfer agreements, research and development agreements, funding agreements, and so forth. And then there's like the day-to-day in-house lawyering work as well. So just like drafting contracts based on what NPP needs. So it could be service agreements, consultancy agreements, IT agreements, and then there's a bit of governance work that I'm involved in as well. But yeah, so that's currently what I'm doing in a bit of a nutshell.
Thank you, Kelvin, and welcome. Nathalie?
Hi, and thank you for having me, Andy. It's nice to be back with O'Neill. So I finished my LL.M somewhat recently, and in the past couple of years have had the chance to work as a policy advisor to the Deputy Mayor of Health and Human Services for the District of Columbia. That was really health policy focused work going across from behavioral health to healthcare finance, and was really helpful in terms of putting into practice the different information that we got at O'Neill, just from a practical and a kind of book smart standpoint of understanding how healthcare functions in the United States. And then through contacts made at O'Neill, I was able to work at the White House at the Office of National Drug Control Policy, where I was brought in as a senior advisor to be responsible for the criminal justice initiatives having to do with health policy and drug control policy, implementing the president's national drug control policy. And I'm currently in transition and being vetted for a presidential appointment that will also be touching on health policy work. And all of these opportunities have really come through my time at O'Neill and allowed me to approach it confidently. So very grateful to be here and to encourage anyone who's considering it to join this path.
Thank you, Nathalie, and welcome. Caroline?
Hi, everyone. It's really nice being here and just hearing about the fantastic backgrounds of my colleagues, which I have not met before, but I'm so glad to be meeting today and hopefully more in the future. On my end, I have a little bit of a different background which is very common in civilist, French, Germany, and Eastern Europe countries. I have a straight line in my studies. I did 10 years of study. First starting with a bachelor in private law in France, and then studied pharmaceutical patents in the UK. And then I sort of took a break from law and did a master's in public health management and international affairs, basically oriented to the humanitarian help and assistance programs. And then I found out about the LL.M and the O'Neill Institute. And I have to agree with Luciana. I was really surprised that it even existed. It was really hard to get my hands on something that would be both, where you could deep dive into the theories of healthcare management systems and Medicare and reimbursement schemes, but at the same time getting hands-on experience, practical experience on how to defend a malpractice claim and how to draft an IP licensing agreement, so that, after all these years of studying, you actually know what you're doing when you get on the market. Now I am a junior associate at McDermott, Will and Emery, which is an American firm. I'm working in the Paris office. It's an all-inclusive firm, but it's a leader in life sciences and health law. And I have to say, it's really hard to really define the scope of what I'm doing, because basically what's happening, at least in Europe, is that you really have health law is not a defined area of practice. It's very industry oriented, and that's not how lawyers worked so far. So what you have is just the industry, companies or healthcare providers coming to us and saying, I want to open my lab, I want to protect my inventions. How do I protect that? How do I valorize my IP that is now born? How do I develop and reach clinical milestones while, getting funds, because it's really expensive and possibly will fail. So every time, I work a lot with startups and they reach clinical milestone because they've executed this amazing license with pharma or with another startups, and we've seen that with COVID. But honestly, this became sexy to the public, but it was, all along. But it's good that we're getting more visibility, and it's really good that programs such as O'Neill's offer such an attractive and full of variety scope of curricula.
Thank you, Caroline. Welcome to all of you. And again, thank you for joining us today and for be willing to share your experiences with us and with our audience. So I have a question for you, Kelvin. You share a lot about your experience right now, your current position, and I was wondering, how has your experience in the health law LL.M program helped you navigate changes and development in the health law field? I know patents in particular was a big issue during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I was wondering if you could share a bit about how the LL.M program prepared you to that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'd say it prepared me very well. I mean, what I found quite helpful with the program was that, so first of all, there are courses that you do that I think gives you a pretty good survey, of all the topics in global health. But then you can kind of tailor your program and your courses to focus more on specific topics that maybe of more interest to you. So ultimately, you kind of walk away from the program having a pretty good understanding of the issues and the landscape, and then also particularly those around your particular area of interest. It was helpful, all that background that I learned at Georgetown and at the Graduate Institute, because when I joined NPP, it is a public health organization with intellectual property being very much at the forefront of what we do here. And as you mentioned, in light of COVID as well, there's been a lot of discussions around IP, a lot of developments in that space as well, in the context of what kind of role should IP play in a pandemic. So I think the health program, it kind of brought me up to speed. It caught me up on the issues, and also the background to the issues as well. And there have also been other things in my day-to-day work where, so for instance, there are certain COVID-19 initiatives that have been created out of COVID-19, which NPP is involved in. And so, I learned about those initiatives during the program. So when I came on the job and they're talking about it, I kind of knew what it was already. I didn't have all this background information that I had to go off and learn on my own. I can just focus on the lawyering, and then all the other discussions. I'm there, and it's I can follow it, I understand it, and then it helps me with the actual work that I'm doing as well. I think one of my courses, it also covered my actual organization as well. And also, I think I remember during my interview, one of the questions that I was asked was to tell them about the current issues in IP in public health. And so that if I hadn't done the health law program, I probably wouldn't have really been able to give them a particularly good answer, but then also to be actually discuss it, give them my opinion, my point of view, how those developments might impact the work of my organization. So I do think the program definitely gives you a lot of knowledge that is quite useful for when you actually step outside of, the classroom, and you start actually working in the field. And you find, I find day to day that there are a lot of things being mentioned here and there, about WHO or other health organizations and other initiatives where I think, oh yeah, I know this is an issue, I cover this in this course, and oh yeah, then there's also this background, and there are these issues around that as well. So yeah, so it's definitely helped me quite a lot.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It's good to know that the courses help you substantively in terms of kind of preparing you to the challenges that you face in your position right now. So one of the things that I always mention to prospective students is that this program, the LL.M program, prepares you not only from the academic perspective, but also from the professional and career development perspective. We put a lot of emphasis on supporting our students throughout their career, not just during the program, but also after graduation. And we have made some changes over the past few years and implementing some new programs to that end. So I was wondering, Nathalie, if you could share a bit about how did the program prepare you for the job market and finding opportunities in the health law field, and what type of career support did you receive during the program and after graduation?
I have to say, this is a funny question to receive because Andy is one of my top contacts who I'm always reaching out to for career advice. So it's funny to be put on the spot with that question. I would say just the first thing that has been so helpful with O'Neill has been, once you join it, I know that the term is overused, but it really does create a sense of family with current and former members of the Institute. And as soon as I started thinking about jobs, even after I'd been accepted to O'Neill, but before I had started the LL.M, I just started reaching out to people who were on faculty, meeting with Andy, and so many people were just happy to get coffee and understand that once you're part of the Institute, you really are in a kind of field of experts that allows there to not really be much formality or pretense about it. So that's the first thing that I would say that was really helpful, is especially if you're interested in working in Washington, D.C., or I've had friends who are working in corporate law. They can be fields that feel really kind of aggressive and hyper competitive. And I've never had a sense at O'Neill that you're really competing for anyone with resources or support from the Institute. And that's been very forthcoming. So I think I would start with an example of my current position that I'm up for. I knew I was working on a limited term contract when I was at the White House. And when I knew that the term was going to be coming up, I just reached out to Andy, spoke to him, spoke to a couple other members of O'Neill and told them that I would be looking for my next position. We talked about some ideas of, what kind of portfolios would be interesting. And something that I've had to learn on the government side, and that's somewhat unfortunate, is that a lot of positions won't be posted immediately to USA Jobs. They're more kind of works in progress within the government. When there's a kind of nebulous portfolio or a kind of newly appointed presidential nominee who isn't exactly sure what they need. And positions can end up being formed on the basis of the experience that you have if you get to join that conversation before it's kind of finalized. So in my case, what happened was I met with Andy. He was approached along with a couple of other members of O'Neill faculty about a previous or current member of Georgetown faculty who had an appointment, needed someone to assist them. And I was able to join the conversation really early on and then secure the position. That has been kind of representative of my general experience in government so far. It's been a real privilege to be a part of O'Neill because it's not really just social connections, it's understanding that once you land in these positions that can be pretty high impact, that there's already a kind of a bond of trust and also a mutual understanding of the level that you'll be performing to in terms of the writing training that you get when you're at O'Neill, and then also contacts who end up just being invaluable once you're in your positions. So I'd say that's kind of the second part of how O'Neill has been really helpful. Once I've had my positions, there have been a lot of issues that come up that I realized very quickly, people just spend decades building subject matter expertise in. And being able to reach out to members of O'Neill and say, what a kind of issue area is, and then to get memoranda that O'Neill has been drafting internally or to help advise government is just an incredible way to really know where the research stands so that you can approach your job confidently as soon as you arrive, whether or not you have the subject matter expertise to begin with. And I went to law school in London at the School of Oriental and African Studies. I think that gave me a very helpful kind of theoretical framework for how I wanted to approach my career. But with O'Neill, it's been a real combination of having a network that facilitates kind of moving forward in your career. And then also once you're in positions, being able to perform at the highest possible standard. So I really can't imagine where I would be if I hadn't had that opportunity.
Thank you, Nathalie. Yes, we're always proud of our graduates and willing to help them throughout their careers and support them. And fortunately, the O'Neill Institute, our program, the Health Law LLM program, we are a hub, one of the major hubs in terms of training and building capacity in this field, and that gives our students a lot of connections and networking opportunities that they can leverage. So I want to turn to you, Luciana, now. I know you joined the program in 2017, you graduated 2018. The world was completely different back then. We didn't have a pandemic. And I know your experience was different, but at the same time, I want to kind of pick up your thoughts on any moment or experiences during the program that stood out to you and has stuck with you throughout your career as a health lawyer.
Yeah, as Natalie mentioned, it's really hard to choose just one moment. I think although it's a short course, it's a very intense year. And during the LLM, we have so many situations that are so unique and but also really helpful to both our lives and career, as you mentioned. Um, when I decided to do my LLM, I had just concluded my master, and my thesis in Brazil was related to a right that allows employees to maintain their healthcare plan after their dismissal. And when I was studying, I realized that the US had a very similar right, but of course with some difference. So I when I did my LLM, I verified that uh, I could learn more about this right in one of the classes. And I remember that I was really impressed by how similar those institutes were. And because the discussions in the US were so far ahead, it was possible to see where the Brazilian law could go. So it was really nice to see how many like insights you can have uh, during those courses. So since then, I always follow up the discussions in health law in the US and try to apply it to my work. Um, I could also mention another moment that one of the professors put me in contact with an American lawyer from at a law firm just to help me to learn more about her career path in health law in the US and try to understand what this would be. So as you all said, I think the LLM, the health law program, O'Neill, uh, they really help us to create those connections. And I think it all helped me to build and actually expand my knowledge about the legal and the regulatory framework in the US. And I think those connections were also really instrumental to help me to understand the work performed by lawyers in health law in the US because as Caroline mentioned, it's so broad and it's an industry actually, right? And I think the law firms in the US, they are so big that they have a massive demand. So it's of course a little bit different if you compare with Brazil, but then I remember when a partner mentioned that they had almost 40 lawyers just working with M&A in health industry. I was like, wow, that's huge. So yeah, I think this would be the moments that I would highlight.
Thank you, Luciana. As we all probably realize by now, the health law field is very, very diverse and broad. I mean, right here we have graduates from our program working at law firms in different parts of the world. We have graduates working with the government, graduates working with public health organizations. So I was wondering, Caroline, if you could share a particularly rewarding or impactful moment that you have experienced in your career in this field.
Sure. I'll be a little bit redundant because it's both a very easy question and a very hard question. Because it's health law and because it's health, it is very, very typically rewarding on a daily basis. And I think I really can't stress this point, and to Luciana's point, obviously being a lawyer is super intense. Our clients can be demanding. As Nathalie said, it's a very competitive environment. And actually being a lawyer or not, that's pretty much what I wake up to in the morning. And when you work with healthcare providers, you work with startups who are looking to cure COVID because a massive pandemic hit and everybody is somehow stuck at home and people are dying in the street, and then suddenly you see what matters, and it's all about curing pain and curing death, something that really is worth waking up in the morning and working hard, and it makes it all the more interesting because the field itself is so valuable. I have to say that every time one of my clients, even though it's not my doing, sometimes it doesn't even have anything to do with the contracts that I drafted for them, but then they reach a milestone and then they send me a little email saying, wow, we got this because of this amazing partnership, or finally we on the path to cure whatever, or I talked to them, I incorporated their company 10 years ago in some country, and then now they're here telling me, we reached market, this idea is finally curing people. And I remember when I talked to my professor, I was 12 about this. So it's just, the clients are amazing. The law is very interesting because it's still information, and very broad. And I think it's just too easy to find the worth in doing that. So that's my share. Some days are a little bit more boring, but most of the time it's really fun.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I would say from where I stand, I'm more like, as you know, kind of academia, health and human rights, global health law, and it's the same feeling. It's a very, very rewarding field to be working at. So I have two last questions for all of you. The first one is, how did you leverage the network and connections made during the program to further your career, and whether you can give us an example? And the question is open to whoever wants to take it. I know, Nathalie, you already kind of touched on that, but whoever wants to take it, feel free to unmute yourself and share. Don't be shy.
I can say that. I think one of the best things that the LLM program is that you have the opportunity to meet people all over the world, and keeping this connection is very special. Everyone that I had the pleasure to meet was always very friendly and willing to help and share their culture and thoughts. So just an example, last year, a health law issue came out here in Brazil. And I remember that I reached out to some folks from the Global Health Law LLM program to exchange some experience. And in that case, the Brazilian government announced that they would create what they called open health. And I was trying to understand if other countries had the same kind of institute similar to it. So especially because this would be one of the situations that Brazil probably built such system based on other models already in place in other countries. So talking to my friends helped me to understand this kind of model, and also to understand some particularities of their healthcare systems. So I think this could be a great example of connection. And I think another one would be, I remember that when I was talking to, I remember that Georgetown and O'Neill, they had kind of a program that put you in contact with lawyers from law firms and other professionals, of course, just to share their experience and challenge, advice, and sometimes also help you with interviews, trying to help you to practice. So I think O'Neill professionals, as Nathalie mentioned, have always made themselves available to connect you with other professionals. And actually, I myself was put in contact with several people who were interested in the health law program. And so I had the opportunity to share with them my experience. And so this is very, very nice.
Thank you. Thank you. Kelvin, Caroline, do you want to, or Nathalie, do you want to share something else?
No, no.
Okay,
I'll
Kelvin.
go. Yeah, I mean, like, just to kind of echo a bit of what's already been said, like, I do think there's a lot of value in the networking, the people who you do meet when you do the program. It is a very supportive network, and it's one that you can very comfortably rely on when you do need to get advice. I mean, I only graduated in 2022, so I'm still, in the infancy stages of my global health career. But even just from the get-go, when I was offered my current role, like, yes, from the outside, you can do your research and you can learn about the organization and know what it does and so forth. But what I found quite helpful was I was able to reach out to, a number of my professors, and I could ask them, like, hey, what do you think of this organization? And as broad as global health is, I think it can also be quite a small world as well. And so, particularly in Geneva, so a lot of people had already, heard of my organization, or had worked with them, and so, I was able to kind of pick their brain and get their thoughts. I think also, so like Katie Gottschalk, who's the executive director of the O'Neill, she had put me in touch with another professional, just for like general, like, career advice basically. But then that conversation very much turned into, hey, look, I've been offered this role. What do you think? And this person, that he'd worked quite a lot with my organization, he knew my boss, and so, I was able to kind of like do my due diligence and learn that, okay, my organization, it's good. My boss is a nice person, and I found that really helpful, and it just meant that I was quite comfortable in my decision when I accepted the role. I wasn't really going into the role like blind or anything, and just hoping that I wasn't going to have a super chaotic boss or anything like that. And I do think moving forward down the track, when the time comes and I need more advice on my career or just anything really, it is a nice network that I can just tap into when I need to.
Thank you, Kelvin. Caroline, and then Nathalie, you have something to share. Caroline first.
Well, to add to what was said, for me, that this program really, or the network, the connections, the seminars that I attended, they enabled me to get the job. I'm not saying that you necessarily will get the job, or as Nathalie said, it's not that easy. It's just it was definitely a turning point in my career. Actually, it changed what I wanted to do. That's a bit of a personal point, but it made me, all the people were so open, and there was so much to work on and to build, that really led to choosing this profession. More specifically, I had the chance to, and I think Sarah Roach was the previous executive director, and she put me in touch with Alumni. And that also got me to work with the US Department of Human and Health Services. I got to work on very US focused trade issues and agreements. And that's really important in the health sector, because there's just a lot of invention in the US, a lot of funding. It's a key jurisdiction to understand as a lawyer, even when you work abroad. So that's also the value of this program, and the value of those people that you meet, that come from everywhere in the world, and I meet in the US, which is such a hub. And to take Andy's words, that's it. And also just fantastic people to meet here.
Thank you, Caroline. Nathalie, anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add a couple of practical points that our other speakers helped me kind of think of. So in terms of actually building contacts through O'Neill that can lead to jobs, one of the most practical things that is worth mentioning is that there's an LLM specific career service, and it's headed by the Dean of Careers, Caroline Springer, who works very, very closely with any members of the LLM who are interested in working with her and with the office more broadly. And they remain accessible to you after you leave O'Neill. So incredibly practical things, especially if you're coming from an international background and are trying to draft a US kind of standard formatted resume, a lot of resume feedback and help with updates. And the other thing that I was going to say about how the LLM helps your career, again, in a really practical way, I wasn't previously familiar with the concept of LLMs. I just knew that I would need to take one because I had gone to law school abroad. And you're able to complete your LLM at O'Neill in National and Global Health Law, while also getting together all of the requirements to take the New York or California bar. And so that's incredibly helpful if you're hoping to get a license to practice in the US and don't want to just be doing a general course LLM. The other point about the kind of valence of an LLM in national and global health law as opposed to a standard track one, I've had friends who've gone to some kind of, top 10 law schools for their LLMs and done standard course LLMs. And it's been more difficult for them to distinguish themselves within the US job market and to explain, why they did their law school abroad and why it is. And it's funny too, because the other panelists are nodding. So I think a lot of us have had this experience. If you're not able to see them. But basically, when you have an LLM in national and global health law, and you want to be working in the field of health law, it's a very kind of, at least in my experience in government in the US, it's a pretty rare degree to have, because in the government offices that I've worked in, there's kind of been a chasm between the Masters of Public Health people who are doing more health policy, and then the Office of General Counsel, which to varying degrees can be involved in policy, but usually isn't. And so to be able to come in with an LLM in national and global health law, HR doesn't really know what to do with you, because regardless of your years of professional experience, as you come in, you have the highest degree of educational attainment besides a PhD, but in a generally more practical sphere than the PhD recipients can get. And so it's really easy to switch between different fields and different offices once you do land. And I've found that flexibility to be really irreplaceable, and something that I know I wouldn't have been able to get without an LLM from O'Neill.
Thank you, Nathalie, and thank you everyone for sharing that. So in the audience today, we have a mix of prospective students, people who are interested in learning more about careers in this field, and some admitted students for the incoming class. So I have a question, the last question to all of you before we move on to the Q&A from the audience. What advice would you give someone who is considering the health law LLM program at Georgetown and maybe a career in health law based on your experience? So I will start with you, Luciana, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. I think as a piece of advice, I would say that if you are interested in working with healthcare and health law, I'm sure that Georgetown is definitely the best option for you to pursue the LLM, because it's very specialized. They have really so many experts in this field. And it's not just because of Georgetown and O'Neill's prestige, but also because they, as I mentioned, they have so many experts, and they organize great events, great debates about a wide range of health law matters. And as we mentioned, they have so many courses that I'm sure you'll find one that fit best your interests, from international to domestic perspectives, as well as if you are more interested in private organizations, such as health insurance companies, as I was. because this is funny, but when I did my LLM, I remember that most people, they used to work with international health policy or government organizations, but I was really interested in private organizations. But even in this case, they have so many options. That was really, really nice. Uh, and also, I think that DC is an amazing city. We were talking about this, and this is my second home. And also, I think it's important to say that everything happens in DC. So you have not just the Capitol and the Supreme Court, but you have the HHS, the World Bank, DOJ, and so many important government institutions that this is really, really helpful. And I would say that there are so many events organized by associations and also law firms, like really good events involving health law issues. So those are really good. I still receive the invitations for those events and I attend them remotely, and they are always really, really helpful and very informative. So I would say that those advices have helped me a lot in my career here in Brazil. So uh, I can try to follow up the discussions. As I mentioned, the US is really far ahead in discussions in healthcare, so they are really helpful for me here.
Thank you, Luciana. Kelvin?
Yeah, so I think if you're going to do the health law program, I think something that I think is good is just given how broad global health is. I think it's quite nice if you kind of spend time kind of thinking about what area within global health might be of interest to you. So that way, when you come to the program, you're a little bit more focused on what you want and what you might want to get out of the program, and just a little bit, and just so you're a little bit more focused. And I guess it means that when you finish and you graduate from the program, you can be a little bit more targeted in your job search, and you just have a better understanding of maybe what you're looking for. And I found that to be helpful with me. But at the same time, I think it's also really good to be open-minded about other areas as well. A lot of areas that I touched on that aren't so directly relevant to what I do now, but when you're in this space, conversations kind of pop up on those other areas, and it's just good to have that understanding. But then also it might also change the direction that you might want to go in as well. So I think it's nice to be a bit flexible. And yeah, like I think if you are considering doing the program, I think it's it is a very worthwhile program. Definitely, if you do it, do your best to meet as many people as you can, talk to as many people, and just kind of take advantage of the environment and all the resources that they have to offer to you.
Thank you, Kelvin. Nathalie, anything to add?
I would second Luciana and Kelvin's points. I think something that's really worth noting is that there are so many different classes that you can take when you join the LLM. And a lot of people in my year split kind of between domestic issues, so United States-based issues, and international issues, so World Health Organization, those kinds of more international organizations. And I think because there are so many classes, they're really great opportunities on the one hand to be strategic. So I knew, for example, that I had an international background, but wanted to be working in the US. So I focused on US-based courses. But there are also so many chances to study things that are just kind of fun and interesting to you and that don't necessarily seem strategic. The class that I ended up taking was a fieldwork practicum on consumer protection. And I learned all about polyfluoroalkyl substances from these environmental protection lawyers If you have any nonstick pans at home, don't use them. There are all of these terrible legal loopholes, and it bioaccumulates. And it was just an amazing opportunity. I had a friend from the LL.M who had a medical degree from India, and she enjoyed the classes so much because you really can delve into subject areas and understand kind of the scientific background, whether or not you have one going in, and then also the kind of policy and legal frameworks that exist. And what's so interesting is, I think if you go in with a really set impression of how you want to go about your time at O'Neill, some people do that and it's really rewarding because they're mid-career and they know that they just have a few kind of gaps that they want to fill. But others like myself, come in relatively fresh out of law school. And by coming in with an open mind, just because it seems like a generally good idea, it's a year that definitely won't be wasted and can advance your career, I think, more so than just about anything that you could do if you weren't pursuing an LL.M and were just staying on your existing career track. And it also, like my PFAS experience with the consumer protection practicum, can end up giving you a kind of firsthand knowledge of trends that you probably wouldn't have been aware of, but for your time at O'Neill, and then being able to, like I was saying at the beginning, get in kind of at the ground level and start pushing policies forward just because of who you're able to be learning from. So it's a really great place to just go towards what interests you and not be too worried about outcomes.
Thank you, Nathalie. Last but certainly not least, Caroline, any piece of advice?
Well, I concur with everything that was said. I think in one sentence, the real value, if you're hesitating, is that whatever you want it to be, for whatever reason you're actually pursuing or thinking about doing either this program or later a career in health law, you can make it what you want to. It's not a set path, as was discussed all throughout this conversation. It's ever changing. It's normal not to know something. It's better not to expect some things, and you have surprises, and that's, life is full of opportunities and you can take them. Obviously, feel free to connect with alumni through LinkedIn. I have so many people just calling me or sending me a message saying, "Hello, I've seen I'm also European, and how is working in the US, or is it actually so expensive? And there are ways, there are things, everybody helps you, blah, blah, blah." So that's really good to contact and also to have what you want to set, and then have a little space for surprises.
Thank you. Thank you, Caroline, and thank you all of you for your time and for sharing your insights. We are getting closer to the end of this session, and we do have a couple of questions from the audience that I'd like us to answer. There was one about pursuing an SJD, which is a doctorate of juridical sciences, like the equivalent of the PhD in law after the LL.M program. I am one of those people that pursue the SJD after the LL.M program, so maybe I can answer that. It's kind of a natural path in some cases for people who are interested in academia to do the LL.M program and then the SJD. And the LL.M program would provide you with opportunities to write papers or what we call graduate independent research, and that would be potentially the basis of your SJD proposal. So it's common for people that are interested in pursuing a career in academia after the LL.M to apply to the SJD program during the LL.M program. So just to briefly answer that question. There was another question that also I think I should answer, if that's okay, related to LL.M applications and whether they are open or closed. We do have a rolling basis application timeline or process. So even though we have set deadlines on our website, you can apply late, as late as mid-June would be appropriate to start in August. I always advise students anyway to apply within the period that is outlined in our website, just so that you have more time to work on your application materials and stuff. And in terms of academic scholarships, we do offer what we call global health law scholarships, and I'd be happy to share more about that via email or a conversation. And I'm posting here in the chat my email for anyone who is interested in learning more about that. And last, we have one question that is directly to Nathalie. It's about whether you need a U.S. citizen to be a U.S. citizen to be eligible for positions in the federal government or DC government, and whether there are any niche or other opportunities for non-citizens in such public roles. I know, Nathalie, if you want to take that.
Sure. Hi, Oleg. So it depends on the role. I know for a lot of municipal and state governments, there's a residency requirement. So in DC, you need to have residency in the district, but I'm not aware of there being a citizenship requirement. In the role that I was at the White House, I needed to have a security clearance, and I have other nationalities besides US, and it wasn't an issue for me to have the other nationalities, but I had to say that I was willing to give up my foreign citizenships, which is really stressful, and thankfully I wasn't called on it. So that would be the case if you have multiple citizenships. If you don't have a US citizenship at all, there are roles that are available, and they can also come with different residency requirements. So like if you have US permanent residence, that can allow you to come into some roles and not others. But the main thing to know, I think, is that the federal government, while there are some kind of common points of passage, there are a lot of really specific roles. And if you can make an argument for why you're the best person to be working on something, which I'm sure you can come up with, and O'Neill could also help you formulate, there's generally a lot more flexibility than people might lead you to believe on the face of it. So I can't imagine that there wouldn't be particular opportunities depending on what you're looking to specialize in. And I know that there are also a lot of pathways to citizenship in health fields that were facilitated during the pandemic for people who had expert knowledge. And I mean, you become a legal expert in health law once you do an LL.M. at O'Neill. And so that would kind of be able to help pave the way if you were looking at certain kind of biomedical sciences that would be in the national interest to be developing. But it's really on a case-by-case basis. And I think it comes back to our earlier point about why it's important to kind of be going in from a standpoint of a network through O'Neill, where you know the people who are interested in you for the position or forming a position around you, rather than, you know, maybe blind applying on USA jobs and then saying at a cold call interview, by the way, is there anything you can do about, you know, citizenship or residency requirements? Because I think if you do the former option, it can be a lot more flexible.
Yeah, exactly that. And I just want to add that in the last 2 years, there have been some new opportunities with, for instance, CDC. They open a public health law fellowship to non-citizens. FDA, they have some opportunities for permanent residents on kind of externship opportunities. So it's on a case-by-case basis, but there are some opportunities available in that regard. Last question. There's one student who is an admitted student and is joining our program in August, and she's asking, which classes, in your opinion, are a must? Or which classes should one student in our program definitely take? So I don't know if anyone wants to share their opinions on this. Maybe we can start with you, Luciana.
I was thinking that I concluded my LLM in 2018, and as you said, a lot of things changed. But I really liked the class about privacy. I thought it was really, really interesting. Another one that I took was the employee benefits. It's actually tax and healthcare, so it's a mix of both topics. What else? Global health law was really interesting for me also. But yeah, I think those would be the ones that I really enjoyed.
Perfect. Kelvin?
Take Andy's class, Industry Epidemics. It's a must. I mean, yeah, no, I mean, the catalog of classes, there's just a lot of, it's just, you like, I personally had a hard time kind of narrowing it down and figuring out which ones I wanted to do. And very much I looked at the professors, I looked at their backgrounds. That's pretty much how I approached it. But yeah, I think Andy's picked up a few new classes as well, which I haven't had the pleasure of attending, but I'm also sure they're equally as good as well as the one that I took with him.
Thank you. Thank you. Nathalie?
Okay, so I have three, just in case you have different interests. So the first that was a kind of, when I say easy 1 credit, I just mean in the sense that it's nice to have a 1 credit class if you have a kind of floating credit that you need. And it's offered some semesters and not others, but it was Pan Epidemics and Phaex, so Public Health Emergencies of International Concern. And I have to say, in terms of the joy of taking the class and doing the readings, we got to do it during the pandemic, which was, you know, unfortunate, but also really interesting. And the exam is amazing because the professors are known for offering like a role play where you're in different senior level positions in the World Health Organization, the US, and a random third-party country that has a new issue, and then it, you know, goes over time. The pandemic is spreading, you need to contain it. And it was very heated, and, you know, shouting matches broke out with the different countries, and it was just fantastic and really gave I think a surprisingly accurate impression of how that works with professors who've been in those talks personally. The other one was the public interest advocacy class that I talked about. That was fascinating, and I think also can probably be responsible for your great grandchildren having less, you know, physiological contamination that's carried intergenerationally. And the final one that I would recommend is the one that everyone does automatically. So there are 2 global health law classes. One is a part of the core curriculum and is great because you get to meet everyone else who's in the LL.M with you, and it's a lot of fun and very interesting. And the other panelists are nodding too, because I think we all really enjoyed it. And then the other one is there's actually a global health colloquium that's led by Larry Gostin, who's the head of the Institute. And he brings in people who are affiliated with O'Neill and not affiliated with O'Neill to speak on their leadership in different issues of national and global health. And that was an extraordinary opportunity. And I was partially responsible for the job that I was able to get at the White House, just because he brings in these amazing people that you then get to talk to and to understand kind of the high level functioning of national and international, you know, government, non-government organizations. So a lot of great classes. It's really hard to go wrong.
Thank you. Caroline?
Well, actually, I think to Kelvin's point, there's so much that, to me, my problem was not the floating credit. It was more, you know, how to negotiate attending classes for free. I'm not sure I'm supposed to say that, so I didn't, but it's just how to fit everything that I wanted to do in the limited classes you can take. But then eventually you always find a way to have amazing lectures and practical sessions. So the first one, and that might be the same as Luciana, is there was a professor that was named Jennifer Gita. I don't know if she's still there, but her classes, and I think it was called something like Hot Topics in Health, Privacy Protection or Information. It was amazing. I would recommend 100% because the topic itself is super interesting, especially now because the US law has changed so much in the past few years. And other countries, you know, such as China, Japan, they're all adopting all these very, very restrictive, or let's say regulatory frameworks. They can be restrictive, and that's just that's really interesting in the world that we currently live in, and is very pragmatic. So that's one of the hands-on practical courses that I was thinking of. And then I think it was the first course that Nathalie mentioned. I did something. So my year was right before COVID, and during this negotiation session, we had this physician who worked in for crisis for Ebola and just everywhere in the world. And he was saying that he was on his way to Wuhan because there was this thing that was going on and we weren't talking about it. And we had this amazing session with the WHO representative. And then and then 2 months later, I was thinking back and I was thinking, wow, we did that in one weekend. And that's actually what I want to, so this session was particularly impactful because the COVID hit, but also you may tend to think, oh, this one weekend,
you know, it's a credit. It's very important. Do I not want to do something that's a bit longer? Well, sometimes what's really important is who monitors the sessions, and maybe they're just not available all year long, or they're practitioners, so it only works a weekend. And I would really, really recommend doing that. Not just that, obviously, otherwise you won't do anything apart from going to the West Coast or the end of the year. But it's good to have a mix of these sessions. And voila, but all the classes that I took were amazing.
Yeah, thank you everyone for sharing that. Yes, Jennifer still teaches at Georgetown, and her course is Health Information Technology and the Law at the moment. At least that's the name, and it touches on kind of digital health issues as well. So it's very, very timely and relevant right now. So we're on time, so thank you to our panelists for their time and for sharing their experiences with us today. We are very, very proud of all of you and the great careers that you have built. And we are grateful to have had the chance to learn how the program helped you get to where you are right now and hear your advice on how to succeed in this field. I also want to thank our audience today. If you have any further questions or would like to learn more about the Health Law LL.M program at Georgetown Law, please visit our website or reach out to me. I left my email address in the chat. So again, thank you all for joining us today, and we hope to see you at Georgetown Law soon. Have a good day.